The FIA has just dropped a bombshell by revealing hidden footage from the Las Vegas inspection room, and the moment that video played inside McLaren, the entire garage went silent before erupting into one of the tensest scenes the team has faced all season. The official report shows that Oscar Piastri's plank measured 8.96, 8.74 and 8.90 mm, while Lando Norris registered 8.88 and 8.93. All readings confirmed several times with instruments accurate to 1,000th of a millimeter and checked again in the presence of McLaren engineers. The newly released FIA footage captures the exact moment those measurements were shown to the team, revealing expressions of shock, frustration and disbelief as the inspectors explained that both cars produced identical uniform wear patterns, something that cannot be explained by luck or by a single impact. And before I reveal what the hidden video shows next and why it caused tension to erupt inside McLaren, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, because the next FIA clip is even more dramatic and could completely reshape the final chapters of the 2025 championship. The tension surrounding the Las Vegas weekend grew dramatically once the FIA confirmed that the hidden inspection footage captured every second of the post-race checks carried out on the McLaren cars. The environment inside the small evaluation room was cold and clinical, and the footage showed FIA officials methodically preparing their tools before beginning the measurements. Every movement was deliberate, and the atmosphere felt heavier with each pass of the gauge. The footage revealed how the inspectors carefully aligned the plank surfaces with the measuring block, making sure no vibration or angle distortion affected the results. This precision created an immediate sense of gravity because the officials were clearly aware that any small deviation could alter the final ruling. The McLaren engineers present in the room appeared to follow each step with growing unease as the numbers began forming a pattern that would soon become impossible to dispute. As the footage progressed, the FIA inspectors announced the first readings from Piastri's car, and the room shifted from careful observation to palpable tension. The officials repeated the measurements multiple times, and every repetition confirmed the same values that placed the plank below the legal threshold. The footage showed McLaren engineers exchanging short glances as the repeated numbers formed a consistent trend. The controlled tone of the FIA representatives contrasted sharply with the sudden silence from the McLaren staff, who seemed to understand that these figures could not be explained by a single corner or an isolated contact with the track. The reaction in the room was not dramatic, but instead a quiet realization that the measurements were not fluctuating but forming a stable pattern. That stability is what transformed this moment into a turning point. The footage did not stop with Piastri's car. The inspectors moved to Norris's machine, and the first readings matched the same behavior the team had just witnessed. The values aligned so closely with those from the other car that even in the silent room the tension increased in an instant. The engineers watching the monitor leaned forward as if hoping for any variation that could offer a different explanation. Instead, the footage revealed the same smooth wear across the plank and the same precise numbers appearing again. The FIA officials followed their procedure without hesitation, and the footage made clear that they knew the implications of these measurements. For McLaren, this was the moment where the possibility of a random incident disappeared completely. The hidden footage also revealed something that had not been described in earlier summaries. It showed the reactions on the faces of individual McLaren staff members during the explanations provided by the FIA technical team. The inspectors calmly described how the erosion patterns followed a uniform line, which indicated a prolonged period of ground contact rather than a momentary strike. The body language from the McLaren engineers displayed a mixture of frustration and disbelief. They understood the mechanics of the situation and knew the significance of identical wear on two separate cars. The footage did not capture spoken arguments, but the tension in the room intensified as the explanation continued with mathematical clarity. Another segment of the footage showed the FIA demonstrating the repeatability of their measurements. They repositioned the block and gauge several times to show that the readings did not change. This part of the recording stood out because it demonstrated the level of confidence the FIA had in the reliability of their equipment. The McLaren staff present could be seen taking notes, but their expressions revealed that they were struggling to identify any procedural weakness that could be challenged. The officials took their time showing how the tools were calibrated, and the footage made it clear that the inspectors were aware this evidence would be scrutinized heavily. This sequence became central to the investigation because it illustrated that the results were not only precise but reproducible under controlled conditions. The final portion of the hidden footage showed the moment when the FIA concluded the inspection and communicated that both cars fell outside the regulation. The McLaren engineers remained largely silent as the decision was explained and the camera captured the visible weight of the moment. The footage highlighted that the tension did not come from raised voices but from the understanding that the data offered no margin for interpretation. It showed a team absorbing the reality that identical measurements on both cars pointed toward a deeper structural issue in their approach to the race weekend. This is the footage that triggered new waves of internal discussion inside McLaren and convinced the FIA to escalate the matter into a broader probe. The core problem revealed by the hidden footage became clear the moment the FIA explained that both McLaren cars showed nearly identical wear patterns across all measured surfaces. The footage captured how the inspectors pointed out the uniform erosion line present on Piastri's plank and then demonstrated the same smooth pattern on Norris's. This was the first sign that the issue could not be blamed on a single event on track. It suggested a behavior embedded in the car's setup. When two cars lose the same fraction of plank thickness at the same reference points, the root cause is almost always structural. This realization is what caused the initial rise in tension in the room because the staff understood that this would be nearly impossible to argue against. The second problem emerged when the FIA emphasized the repeatability of the measurements. The footage showed inspectors resetting their instruments and repeating the process several times, each time producing the same readings. This reliability eliminated the possibility of measurement error or equipment distortion. McLaren engineers were shown watching closely, but the footage made evident that they could not find any inconsistency in the procedure. The inspectors provided calm and detailed explanations as they worked, and the consistency of the results formed a technical wall that left no room for reinterpretation. This part of the footage highlighted how the issue was not a matter of debate but a matter of physics. A deeper issue arose when the FIA described how the lack of practice running in Las Vegas forced all teams to rely more heavily on simulations rather than validated data. The footage captured the moment officials explained that simulations cannot fully replicate how a brand new circuit behaves under race fuel and nighttime temperatures. McLaren had set the ride height aggressively close to the minimum, and the inspectors made it clear that this approach left no safety margin. The body language of the McLaren engineers shifted as this explanation continued because the hidden footage revealed how uncomfortable they became once they realized the breach was consistent with an engineering decision rather than bad luck. Another problem the FIA highlighted was the behavior of the cars under colder temperatures. The footage included the explanation that tire pressures drop when the track cools, causing the effective ride height to decrease even further. This means the plank moves closer to the track surface for longer periods. The FIA officials explained that this effect is predictable and must be accounted for during the setup process. When the inspectors stated this on camera, the tension inside the room intensified. McLaren staff understood the implication immediately. If the temperature effect was predictable, then the team should have modeled it more conservatively. The hidden footage captured the subtle silence that followed this explanation. The footage also exposed the structural nature of the compression forces acting on the car. The FIA described how both cars experienced similar aerodynamic load distributions throughout the race. This meant that the plank was subjected to near-identical pressure cycles on each lap. When the officials pointed out that this behavior matched the measured wear patterns, the engineers listening in the room were shown taking notes with a level of seriousness that reflected the gravity of the finding. It was a revelation that connected the setup philosophy directly to the resulting illegality. The footage underlined that this was a systemic issue rather than an unexpected incident. The final and most significant problem shown in the footage came when the FIA concluded that the violation appeared unavoidable given the ride height configuration McLaren had chosen. The inspectors explained that the combination of incomplete practice data, lower night temperatures and aggressive setup alignment pushed both cars into a scenario where the plank would inevitably fall below the legal thickness. This conclusion is what triggered the emotional reaction inside McLaren. The footage revealed a team realizing that the breach was not a matter of misfortune but a direct consequence of a strategic decision. It was the moment when the tension stopped being about the measurement and became about responsibility. The engineering pressure inside McLaren intensified the moment the hidden footage revealed how the FIA worked through each measurement with calm precision. The video showed the inspectors describing the relationship between aerodynamic load and plank compression, explaining how the car will naturally sink lower when air density increases at night. This detail illustrated that the forces acting on the floor were not random or unpredictable. They were a direct product of physics acting on a configuration that was already operating at the edge of legality. When McLaren engineers saw this laid out in the footage, they understood that the investigation was no longer about a single session or a single mistake but about a deeper structural behavior that the team had failed to anticipate. The footage also highlighted how the FIA linked the uniform wear pattern to the baseline ride height philosophy McLaren had taken into the Las Vegas weekend. The inspectors explained that when a car is set close to the minimum allowable height, even small environmental changes can push it below the limit. The McLaren engineers shown in the recording appeared to grasp the significance immediately. This was not a case of the plank suffering isolated high-energy contact. It was a case of the floor spending long stretches at a height that produced continuous abrasion. The officials emphasized that the repeated measurements across the plank confirmed this behavior, and the footage captured the growing realization among McLaren's technical team that the setup direction itself was under scrutiny. Another part of the footage showed the FIA walking through the suspension behavior under full fuel weight. The officials explained that when a car begins a race with a heavy load, the suspension compresses more deeply over bumps and longer straight sections. The inspectors pointed out that in Las Vegas the lack of long-run practice deprived teams of the data needed to confirm how their suspension would react across an entire race distance. The footage captured McLaren engineers nodding but also showing signs of frustration as they understood the implication. Without complete data, the team had committed to a configuration that relied heavily on modeling rather than observation, and the footage made it clear that this decision contributed directly to the uniform where the FIA detected. The hidden clips also exposed how the FIA used repeatability as a foundation for its conclusions. In the footage, the inspectors demonstrated multiple resets of the measuring tools, showing that the values remained unchanged each time. This eliminated any possible argument about variance or calibration errors. McLaren engineers were shown watching the repeated tests in silence, recognizing that the procedure was being documented deliberately and carefully. The clarity and consistency of the numbers left no technical avenue for debate. This sequence illustrated how engineering pressure evolved into accountability. The footage made it plain that the measurements were not only accurate but reproducible in a controlled environment, which gave the FIA complete confidence in its findings.